The kitchen floor was wet again. Rosa Delgado moved her mop in practiced circles, the same motion she'd repeated for 3 years in the Marcelli mansion. 7:30 in the morning, every morning, she cleaned the marble floors that cost more than her entire apartment building. Her hands were raw from bleach, and her back ached from bending, but she never complained. Complaints got you fired, and fired meant eviction, meant no food, meant watching your daughter's eyes dim with hunger. Her daughter. Rosa's gaze drifted to the corner of the kitchen, where Isabella sat cross-legged on a small cushion. Her school books spread around her like fallen leaves. 12 years old, with dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and eyes the color of warm honey. Beautiful, intelligent, and completely silent. Isabella hadn't spoken a single word since the day she was born. The doctors called it selective mutism, though there was nothing selective about it. Her vocal cords worked fine. The medical tests showed nothing wrong. But something inside Isabella's mind had locked her voice away in a place no one could reach. Rosa watched her daughter's pencil move across the page, solving math problems with the focused intensity of someone who'd learned to communicate through written words instead of spoken ones. Isabella's notebook was always nearby, filled with careful handwriting that said everything her voice couldn't. "Good morning, Mama," written at dawn. "I love you," scrawled before bed. Conversations conducted in silence, but no less real. The mansion stirred to life around them. Footsteps echoed from the second floor. Doors opened and closed. The Marcelli family was waking up, and Rosa's real work was about to begin. Antonio Marcelli owned half the construction companies in the city, and all of the union contracts that made them profitable. Everyone knew his business dealings weren't entirely legal, but no one dared say it out loud. Men who asked too many questions about the Marcelli family tended to disappear. Rosa had learned to keep her eyes down, her mouth shut, and her daughter invisible. That last part was getting harder. Isabella was growing up, her childish features sharpening into something that would soon draw attention. Rosa saw the way some of Antonio's business associates looked at her daughter during their visits, their gazes lingering too long on a 12-year-old girl who couldn't scream for help. It made her stomach turn, made her want to grab Isabella and run somewhere far away where powerful men couldn't hurt powerless girls. But running required money they didn't have, and courage Rosa had exhausted years ago. "Isabella, mi amor," Rosa whispered, switching to Spanish like she always did when they were alone. "You need to stay in the kitchen today. Don Antonio's son is coming home from boarding school." Isabella looked up from her homework, her expression curious. She reached for her notebook and wrote quickly. "The son who's been in Switzerland?" "Yes, Dante. He's been away for 4 years." Rosa wrung out her mop, avoiding her daughter's eyes. "I don't know what he's like now, but rich boys who've been sent away to expensive schools, they come back thinking they own the world. Stay out of his way." Isabella nodded, but Rosa caught the flash of interest in her daughter's eyes. At 12, Isabella was old enough to be curious about the world beyond their small corner of the mansion, young enough to still believe in things like fairness and kindness from people who lived in houses with 7 bathrooms. Rosa wished she could protect that innocence forever, but innocence had a short lifespan in the Marcelli mansion. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The front door opened with the heavy thud of expensive wood against marble. Male voices filled the foyer, speaking rapid Italian that Rosa had learned to understand but never speak. Antonio Marcelli's voice boomed with false warmth, the kind of greeting fathers gave sons they barely knew. "Dante, welcome home." Rosa continued mopping, making herself as invisible as possible. But Isabella's head tilted toward the voices, her curiosity winning over caution. She stood up quietly, moving toward the kitchen doorway to peek into the foyer. "Isabella, no," Rosa hissed, but her daughter was already looking. Dante Marcelli stood in a shaft of morning sunlight that made him look like something from a painting. 18 years old, tall and lean, with the kind of build that came from expensive gyms and personal trainers. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his suit tailored to fit like a second skin. But it was his face that made Isabella stare, the sharp cheekbones and strong jaw softened by eyes that held something unexpected. Sadness. Deep, bone-tired sadness that no amount of money could cure. Rosa saw it too. She'd learned to read people in this house, to spot danger before it arrived, to sense which of Antonio's associates were merely criminals and which were monsters. Dante didn't look like either. He looked like a prisoner who'd just been transferred to a nicer cell. 4 years, Antonio was saying, gripping his son's shoulder with possessive pride. "My boy comes home a man. Switzerland treated you well, yes? The school, the training, everything I arranged? Yes, father. Dante's voice was polite, empty. Everything was exactly as you arranged. There was something in that emphasis, a subtle rebellion that Rosa recognized instantly. Antonio either didn't hear it or chose to ignore it. Good. Come, we have much to discuss. Your position in the family business, your responsibilities, your future. Antonio steered his son toward the study, already planning, already controlling. The Torelli family is sending their daughter to dinner next week. Beautiful girl, good bloodlines. Perfect match for... I just got home, father. Dante's voice remained carefully neutral. Perhaps we could discuss business arrangements later? Antonio's grip on his son's shoulder tightened visibly. Rosa saw the way Dante's jaw clenched, the flash of pain he tried to hide. She'd seen that dynamic before, fathers who loved their sons only as extensions of themselves, as tools to build empires and cement legacies. Of course, Antonio said, releasing him. Settle in. Your room is prepared. Rosa will bring your luggage up. That was Rosa's cue. She set down her mop and hurried toward the foyer, keeping her eyes respectfully lowered. But as she reached for the first suitcase, Dante spoke. I can carry my own bags. Rosa froze. In 3 years of working in this mansion, she'd never heard anyone in the Marcelli family offer to do something for themselves. They snapped fingers and gave orders, and expected instant obedience. They certainly didn't carry their own luggage. Antonio laughed, but it sounded forced. Don't be ridiculous. That's what the help is for. Rosa, take the bags to Dante's room. 2nd floor, east wing. Rosa nodded quickly, reaching for the suitcases again. But Dante was faster. His hand closed around the handle of the largest bag before she could lift it. I said I'll carry them. His voice was quiet but firm. Thank you for the offer, but I don't need help. Their eyes met for just a second. Rosa saw something in his gaze that startled her respect. Not the cold dismissal she was used to from the Marcelli family, but actual acknowledgement of her humanity. It lasted only a heartbeat before he turned away, hefting 2 suitcases like they weighed nothing. Antonio watched his son climb the stairs with an expression Rosa couldn't quite read. Disappointment, maybe, or concern that 4 years in Switzerland had made Dante soft, unsuitable for the brutal business of running a criminal empire. Rosa returned to her mop, her heart beating faster than it should. Something about Dante Marcelli didn't fit the pattern she'd learned to recognize in this house. And patterns that didn't fit were either dangerous or miraculous. She wasn't sure which scared her more. Isabella had retreated to her corner of the kitchen, but her notebook was open to a fresh page. When Rosa glanced over, she saw her daughter had written a single word in careful script. Different. Yes, Rosa thought. Different. But different in Antonio Marcelli's world could get you killed. The days that followed established a dangerous pattern. Dante sought out Isabella and Rosa whenever he could escape his father's plans. He helped with homework, taught Italian phrases, sat on kitchen floors explaining algebra like it was the most natural thing in the world for the heir to a criminal empire. Isabella bloomed under his attention. Her eyes sparkled when he entered the room, her notebook filled with questions she saved just for him. And Rosa watched with growing dread as her daughter developed feelings that couldn't possibly end well. But it was Dante who worried her most. He looked at Isabella with something beyond kindness, beyond protection. He looked at her like she was a lifeline, the only genuine thing in a house full of lies and violence. And that kind of dependence was dangerous for everyone involved. 3 weeks after his return, the engagement dinner with the Torellis changed everything. The Russian attack, the bullets through the kitchen window, Dante throwing himself over Rosa and Isabella to shield them from the glass and gunfire. And in that moment of terror, Isabella's carefully guarded secret shattered along with the windows. Thank you. 2 words whispered in a voice that shouldn't exist. The revelation that followed Isabella explaining she'd hidden her voice for 4 years to protect herself and her mother set off a chain reaction that couldn't be stopped. Antonio discovered he had a witness to years of criminal conversations. The Torellis questioned the wisdom of allying with a family that couldn't control its own household, and Dante made the choice that would define all their futures. They're under my protection, both of them. Whatever happens, they're off limits. That's my price for marrying Bianca. But prices in the Marcelli world were never as simple as they seemed. The night before the wedding, Rosa found Dante in the servants' quarters with 2 packed suitcases and 3 plane tickets. California, he said without preamble. There's a car coming in 20 minutes. I've arranged everything. Jobs, apartment, new identities if you need them. You and Isabella are getting out tonight. What about you? Rosa whispered, already knowing the answer. I'm staying. I'm testifying against my father. The federal prosecutors have been building a case for months, and I'm their key witness. But I can't do that if I'm worrying about whether Antonio's men are hunting you. Isabella appeared in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. You're sending us away. I'm setting you free. Dante knelt down to her level, his voice gentle despite the pain in his eyes. Isabella, you're 12 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. Don't waste it trapped in my world. But I want to help you. I have information too. I heard things. No. Dante's voice turned sharp. You forget everything you heard in this house. You erase it from your memory. You go to California and you become that accountant you dream about being. You live a normal life far away from men like my father. Far away from men like me. You're not like him, Isabella said fiercely, her new voice still rough but strong. You're nothing like him. Dante's expression crumbled for just a moment before he rebuilt his walls. Maybe not yet, but if I stay in this world long enough, I will be. That's why you need to leave, so you never have to see what I become. The car arrived exactly on time. Dante helped them load the suitcases, then stood in the darkness watching as they drove away. Rosa held Isabella as her daughter sobbed, watching through the rear window as the only person who'd ever protected them disappeared into the night. Will we ever see him again, Mama? Rosa didn't have an answer. She just held her daughter tighter and prayed that Dante Marcelli's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. 3 days later, the news broke. Dante Marcelli had testified before a federal grand jury, providing evidence that would ultimately dismantle his father's organization. Antonio Marcelli was arrested. The Torelli alliance crumbled, and an 18-year-old boy destroyed everything his family had built in exchange for justice and the safety of 2 people who most would consider insignificant. In California, Rosa and Isabella started over. New names, new lives, new futures built on the foundation of one boy's courage. And Isabella made herself a promise. Someday when she was strong enough, when she was worthy of his sacrifice, she would find Dante Marcelli and show him that his gift hadn't been wasted. Someday. 10 years later, Isabella Martinez, though she still thought of herself as Isabella Morales in her heart, stared at the financial statements spread across her desk and felt the familiar thrill of discovery. Numbers didn't lie. They told stories that words tried to hide, revealed truths that people went to elaborate lengths to conceal. At 22, she'd become exactly what she'd dreamed of as a 12-year-old sitting on a kitchen floor doing homework. A forensic accountant specializing in complex financial crimes. The kind of accountant who could trace money through a dozen shell corporations and find the rot at the center. The kind of accountant that criminal organizations feared. Her current case was supposed to be routine, a suspected money laundering operation using legitimate construction companies as fronts. But as Isabella dug deeper into the financial records, she found something that made her blood run cold. A name buried in the subsidiary documents. A signature on a decade-old incorporation form. Dante Marcelli. Her hands shook as she pulled up the full file. It couldn't be him. Dante had destroyed his father's organization 10 years ago. He'd testified, brought down an empire, disappeared into witness protection or Europe or wherever people went when they burned their entire lives to the ground. But the signature was real. And the construction company she was investigating had been founded 12 years ago, right around the time Dante would have been 18, right before everything fell apart. Isabella's mind raced through the possibilities. Had Dante been involved in his father's crimes before he turned? Had he helped build this operation only to betray it later? Or was this something else entirely, evidence that his rebellion hadn't destroyed everything Antonio had built? She needed more information, which meant she needed to find Dante Marcelli. After 10 years of silence, of respecting his wish that she stay away and stay safe, Isabella was about to break her promise. Because if Dante was in trouble, if his past was coming back to haunt him, then she owed him the same protection he'd once given her. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The trail led to New York. Not the glittering Manhattan of wealth and power, but the Brooklyn neighborhoods where old Italian families still held sway, where loyalty was currency and betrayal meant death. Isabella arrived on a Friday evening, checking into a modest hotel in Park Slope. She'd learned caution from Rosa, learned to move through the world quietly, to gather information before acting. But she'd also inherited something else, the stubborn courage that had made a 12-year-old girl threaten a Mafia boss to protect her mother. She found him on the 3rd day. The gym was tucked between a bodega and a dry cleaner, the kind of place that had been there for 40 years, and would probably be there for 40 more. Isabella watched from across the street as men came and went, some in business suits, some in work clothes, all of them moving with the careful awareness of people who'd learned to watch their backs. And then Dante emerged, 28 years old, still tall, but broader now, his lean teenage frame replaced by the solid muscle of a man who'd spent years training his body the way other people trained for war. His hair was shorter, almost military in its precision. A scar cut through his left eyebrow knew since she'd last seen him, but it was his eyes that made Isabella's breath catch. The sadness she remembered had been replaced by something harder. Not cruelty, exactly, but the kind of weariness that came from seeing too much, surviving too much, losing too much. He looked dangerous. He looked haunted. He looked like someone who'd forgotten how to hope. Isabella's heart ached. This wasn't the gentle 18-year-old who'd sat on kitchen floors explaining parabolas. This was someone who'd been broken and poorly reassembled, functional but no longer whole. She waited until he was alone, walking down a quiet side street toward what looked like a modest apartment building. Then she stepped out of the shadows. "Hello, Dante." He spun, his hand moving automatically toward his jacket. But he froze when he saw her face, recognition hitting him like a physical blow. "Isabella?" His voice was rough, disbelieving. "No, you're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be in California, safe, away from all of this." "I am in California, most of the time." Isabella moved closer, her heart pounding. "I'm a forensic accountant now, like I said I would be, and I found something in a case I'm working on, something with your name on it." Dante's expression went carefully blank. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, not after everything." Isabella pulled out the documents she'd printed, holding them up. "This construction company, the one being investigated for money laundering. You're listed as a founding partner. Either you were involved in your father's operations before you testified, or I never actually left." Dante's jaw clenched. "Which do you think is more likely?" The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Isabella's mind raced, piecing together implications she didn't want to face. "You testified against your father. The news said his organization was dismantled. I read the reports, Dante. You destroyed everything he built." "I destroyed his organization, not the idea of it, not the need for it." Dante turned away, his shoulders tight with tension. "Nature abhors a vacuum, Isabella. When Antonio Marcelli went to prison, someone had to step in. The construction companies, the union contracts, the legitimate businesses that kept thousands of people employed, they didn't just disappear. So you took over." Isabella felt dizzy. "You became your father. I became what I had to become." Dante's voice was bitter. The choice was watch everything fall apart and let violent men scramble for the pieces, or try to rebuild it into something less destructive. I chose the latter. You're still a criminal. Yes. Dante turned back to face her, his eyes blazing with pain and defiance. I'm still a criminal. I move money through shell corporations. I control territories. I make deals with men who'd kill me if they thought they could get away with it. But I don't traffic drugs. I don't hurt children. I don't force women into prostitution. And I use the money to fund youth programs, community centers, scholarships for kids like you used to be. Isabella stared at him, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the boy she'd known. That doesn't make it right. No, Dante agreed quietly. It just makes it less wrong, which is the best I can do in a world that doesn't offer good options. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 10 years of separation, with choices made and prices paid, with the ghost of what they might have been if the world had been different. Your mother, Dante said finally. How is Rosa? She's good. She runs her own bookkeeping business now. Has a small house in San Diego. She asks about you sometimes, wonders if you're okay. Tell her I'm fine. I won't lie to her. Not for you. Isabella stepped closer, closing the distance between them. You're not fine, Dante. You're barely holding it together. I can see it in your eyes. Then you should leave. Dante's voice turned cold, defensive. Go back to California. Forget you saw me. Close your investigation, and move on with your life. I can't. Why not? Because you gave me a life worth living, and I won't abandon you when you're drowning in one that's killing you. The words stripped away Dante's defenses like a knife through silk. His carefully maintained control crumbled, and Isabella saw the boy he'd been scared, trapped, desperate for someone to see him as human instead of a chess piece. Isabella, he whispered. You don't understand what you're asking. My world, it's dangerous. Men like me don't have happy endings. We survive until we don't. Then survive longer. Fight harder. Let someone help you for once instead of always being the one who protects everyone else. Dante closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. I sent you away so you wouldn't have to see what I became, so you could remember me as someone worth saving instead of just another monster in an expensive suit. You're not a monster. Isabella reached out, her hand touching his chest where she could feel his heart racing. You're a man who's been carrying an impossible burden alone for 10 years, but you don't have to carry it alone anymore. I can't drag you into this. I won't. You're not dragging me anywhere. I'm choosing to be here. I'm choosing you. Isabella's voice strengthened with certainty. That 12-year-old girl you protected? She grew up. She became strong. And now she's strong enough to stand beside you instead of behind you. Dante stared at her like she was a miracle he didn't deserve. Slowly, carefully, as if she might disappear if he moved too fast, he raised his hand and cupped her cheek. When did you become so fearless? I learned from the best. The kiss was inevitable. 10 years of separation, of wondering, of dreaming about a future that seemed impossible, all of it crystallized into a single moment of connection that felt like coming home. When they finally pulled apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. This is a mistake. Being with me puts you in danger. Being without you hasn't exactly been safe either. Isabella smiled despite her racing heart. Besides, I'm already investigating a case that leads back to your organization. I'm already in danger. At least this way, I'm in danger with you instead of against you. That's not reassuring. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be honest. Dante laughed. Actually laughed, and the sound was like sunlight breaking through clouds. God, I missed you. I missed both of you. Then stop pushing us away. Let us help you. Isabella pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Whatever you're dealing with, whatever's coming, face it with allies instead of alone. The money laundering investigation, Dante said, his mind already shifting into tactical mode. How deep does it go? Who's running it? Federal prosecutors out of Manhattan. They've been building the case for 6 months. And Dante, Isabella hesitated. There's someone on the inside feeding them information. Someone close to you. Dante's expression hardened. I know. I've suspected for months but couldn't prove it. That's why I've been careful. Why I've been moving assets, preparing for the worst. Who do you think it is? Marco Santini, my father's old underboss. He never forgave me for testifying against Antonio, but he's too valuable to eliminate without proof, and too smart to leave evidence I can find. Isabella's forensic accountant mind kicked into high gear. If he's feeding information to the prosecutors, he's probably getting paid, which means there will be a money trail. Let me look at your financial records. If he's taking payments, I'll find them. It's dangerous. If he suspects you're investigating him, then we'll be careful. But Dante, if you don't stop the leak, everything you've built will come crashing down. The legitimate businesses, the community programs, all of it. Is that what you want? No. Dante pulled her close again, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. But I don't want to lose you either. Not again. Not when I just got you back. Then don't push me away. Let me help you. Let me be your partner instead of someone you're protecting. Isabella looked up at him, her honey-colored eyes fierce with determination. I'm not that 12-year-old girl anymore, Dante. I'm a woman who knows exactly what she wants. And I want you. All of you. The good parts and the broken parts and everything in between. Dante studied her face for a long moment, as if memorizing every detail. Then he made his choice. The same kind of choice he'd made 10 years ago, when he'd given up everything to keep her safe. But this time, instead of sending her away, he was choosing to let her stay. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. But we do this smart. Carefully. And if things go wrong, if Marco or anyone else targets you, you promise me you'll run. No heroics, no stubborn courage, just survival. I promise. Isabella lied, knowing she would never abandon him the way he'd once made himself abandon her. Some promises were meant to be broken, especially when the alternative was losing the person who'd taught you how to be brave. The war that followed wasn't fought with bullets and blood, though there was plenty of both before the end. It was fought with ledgers and bank statements, with carefully traced money trails that revealed Marco Santini's betrayal in excruciating detail. Isabella worked 18-hour days, buried in Dante's financial records, finding patterns that would have been invisible to anyone who hadn't spent years learning to read the language of hidden money. And what she found was worse than simple betrayal. Marco wasn't just feeding information to the prosecutors. He was embezzling millions from Dante's legitimate businesses, setting up Dante to take the fall for crimes Marco was committing. When the federal case finally came to trial, it would look like Dante had continued his father's criminal empire while pretending to reform it. "He's framing you," Isabella said one night, her voice tight with fury. "Every illegal transaction, every laundered dollar, it all traces back to accounts with your name on them. But the actual control, that's Marco. He's been setting this up for years." Dante's face was carved from stone as he reviewed her evidence. "He waited until I trusted him. Until I gave him enough access to destroy me. What are we going to do? We're going to beat him at his own game." Dante pulled out his phone, making a call that would change everything. "But it's going to require something I swore I'd never do again." "What?" "Testify. Again. But this time, not against my father's organization. Against the man who's trying to steal it." The federal prosecutors were skeptical at first. Dante Marcelli coming to them voluntarily seemed too good to be true. But Isabella's documentation was irrefutable. She'd built a case that could withstand the scrutiny of the best forensic accountants in the country. And more than that, she'd found something else buried in Marco's files. Evidence that he'd been working with the Kozlov family, the same Russians who'd attacked the Marcelli mansion 10 years ago, the same men who'd been responsible for the shooting that had revealed Isabella's voice. It all connected. The attack had never been about killing Antonio. It had been about chaos, about creating an opportunity for Marco to seize power in the confusion. And when Dante had testified and taken control instead, Marco had simply waited, planned, and prepared to take it all away. "He's the reason I've been so careful," Dante told Isabella the night before his testimony. "He's the reason I couldn't risk being with anyone, couldn't let myself care about anything that could be used against me, because I knew someone close to me wanted me dead." "But you're caring now," Isabella pointed out. "You're with me. You're taking the risk, because you make me remember what I'm fighting for. Without you, this was just survival. Now it's about building something worth protecting." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Isabella sat in the courtroom every day, watching Dante dismantle Marco's schemes with the precision of someone who'd learned from bitter experience. The evidence she'd gathered became the foundation of a case that would ultimately send Marco Santini to prison for 25 years. But more than that, it cleared Dante's name. The legitimate businesses he'd built, the community programs he'd funded, the careful work he'd done to reform his father's empire into something less destructive, all of it was vindicated. He wasn't a saint. The prosecutors made that clear. But he also wasn't the monster Marco had tried to paint him as. He was something more complicated, a man trying to do better in a world that rarely rewarded such efforts. On the day the verdict came down, Isabella met Dante outside the courthouse. Media swarmed around them, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions, but Dante ignored all of it. He pulled Isabella into his arms and held her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to knock him down. "It's over," he whispered into her hair. "It's finally over." "No," Isabella corrected gently. "It's finally beginning." They left New York that night, not running, but choosing. Choosing to build something new in a place that didn't know Dante Marcelli as a Mafia heir or a whistleblower or a reformed criminal, just as a man trying to do right by the people he loved. They went to California, to the small house in San Diego where Rosa lived, where she opened the door and saw her daughter standing beside the boy who'd saved them both a decade ago. "Mijo," Rosa breathed, tears streaming down her face. "You came back to us." "I never really left," Dante said, returning her embrace. "You and Isabella, you've been with me every day. The only reason I survived at all was because I knew I had to be worthy of the sacrifice you made when you used my gift to build something beautiful." That night, the three of them sat in Rosa's kitchen, so different from the Marcelli mansion, so warm and full of life, and talked for hours. About the past decade, about the choices they'd made, about the futures they wanted to build. And Isabella watched Dante's face as he laughed at Rosa's stories, as he relaxed in a way she'd never seen, and she knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Not the safe choice, not the easy choice, but the right one. Because some people are worth fighting for. Some people are worth the risk of getting hurt. Some people make you braver, stronger, better than you ever thought you could be. 3 months later, Isabella and Dante stood in a small chapel in San Diego. No cameras, no reporters, no reminder of the world they'd left behind. Just Rosa crying happy tears, a handful of close friends, and 2 people who'd survived impossible circumstances to find their way back to each other. When Dante slipped the ring on Isabella's finger, his hands were steady. When Isabella said her vows, her voice was strong and clear, a voice that had once been silent, that had been found in a moment of terror, that now spoke truths that would last a lifetime. I promise to stand beside you, to be your partner, your ally, your home. I promise to remind you who you are when the world tries to tell you who you should be. I promise to love you not despite your past, but because your past made you into the man who gave me a future. Dante's voice was rough with emotion when he made his promises in return. I promise to protect you, to honor you, to never take for granted the gift of being loved by someone as fierce and brave as you. I promise to build a life worthy of the sacrifice your mother made. I promise to be the man you believed I could be, even when I didn't believe it myself. The kiss that sealed their vows was witnessed by everyone who mattered, and somewhere in that kiss was the echo of a kitchen floor, where an 18-year-old boy had explained algebra to a 12-year-old girl, where kindness had planted seeds that took 10 years to bloom into something neither of them could have predicted. 5 years later, Isabella walked into her home office to find Dante sitting at her desk, staring at a letter with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What is it?" she asked, moving to his side. Dante held up the letter. It was from the federal government. An official pardon for his testimony, for his cooperation, for the evidence that had brought down not just Marco Santini but 3 other criminal organizations that Marco had been secretly working with. "It means I'm free," Dante said, his voice filled with wonder. "Actually, completely free. No more surveillance, no more restrictions. No more looking over my shoulder. They're wiping the slate clean." Isabella pulled him into her arms, feeling his heart race against her chest. "You've been free for years, Dante. This just makes it official." "No," he said, pulling back to look at her. "I've been building toward freedom. But I wasn't really free until right now, until I could look at you and know that I don't have to apologize for my past anymore. I can just be grateful for my present." Their daughter, 3-year-old Rosa, named after the woman who'd saved them both, chose that moment to toddle into the office, her dark curls bouncing, her honey-colored eyes bright with mischief. "Papa, Mama, come play." Dante scooped her up, spinning her until she shrieked with delight. Isabella watched them together and felt her throat tighten with emotion. This was what they'd fought for. This was what every sacrifice had been building toward. A life where children could laugh without fear, where love wasn't a weakness to be exploited, where the most dangerous thing in the house was a 3-year-old with markers and an unsupervised wall. That night, after Rosa was asleep, Isabella and Dante stood on their back porch watching the California sunset. The same sunset that had welcomed them a decade ago when 2 broken people had arrived looking for a fresh start. "Do you ever regret it?" Isabella asked. "Giving up your father's empire, testifying, all of it." Dante pulled her closer, his hand resting on her waist where their second child was just beginning to show. "Every day," he admitted. "And then I come home to you, to our daughter, to the life we've built. And I realize that I didn't give up an empire. I traded one prison for something infinitely more valuable." "What's that?" "A home." Dante kissed her temple gently. "A real home, with people who love me not because they fear me, or need me, or want to use me, but because they choose to. Every single day." Isabella turned in his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him properly. "And I will choose you every day for the rest of our lives." The 18-year-old boy, who was kind when he could have been cruel. The 28-year-old man who was brave when he could have been broken. And the person you'll become tomorrow, and the day after, and every day after that. Even when I'm old and gray and can't remember how to solve quadratic equations? Especially then. Isabella smiled against his lips. "Though I'll probably still need help with the quadratic equations. Those things are confusing." Dante laughed, the sound free and genuine and full of a joy he'd never thought he'd deserve. And in that laugh was the echo of every choice that had led them here. Every sacrifice, every risk, every moment of courage that had seemed impossible at the time. 10 years ago, a 12-year-old girl had found her voice in a moment of terror, and an 18-year-old boy had chosen protection over power. Now they'd found something neither of them had been looking for. A love story that proved redemption was possible, that broken people could heal together, that the most dangerous romance wasn't between a mafia boss and the innocent girl he saved. It was between 2 survivors who chose each other every single day, who built a life on the foundation of sacrifice and courage, who proved that sometimes the best endings come from the most impossible beginnings. In the house behind them, little Rosa dreamed of princesses and dragons and happy endings. And for once, in a world that rarely offered such things, she would be absolutely right. Because happy endings aren't given. They're built. One choice at a time, one sacrifice at a time, one day at a time. And Isabella Martinez Marcelli and Dante Marcelli had built theirs with everything they had, 3 years earlier. The reunion outside that Brooklyn gym had been the easy part. What came after navigating the dangerous space between wanting each other and actually building something that could survive their world that was harder than either of them had imagined. Isabella moved into a short-term rental in Brooklyn, telling herself it was just for the investigation, just until she helped Dante expose Marco's betrayal. But they both knew it was a lie. She was there because 10 years of separation had done nothing to diminish the connection forged in that kitchen when she was 12 and he was 18. Except now, she wasn't 12 anymore, and the way Dante looked at her had changed entirely. The first week was professional. Isabella set up her laptop in Dante's office, a surprisingly modest space above a legitimate construction company in Red Hook. She pored over financial records while Dante conducted business, their interactions carefully formal, maintaining the boundaries that kept things safe. But boundaries in their world were made to be crossed. It was Isabella who broke first. She'd been working late, tracing a particularly complex series of shell corporations, when Dante returned from a meeting that had clearly gone badly. His knuckles were bruised, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage. He didn't say anything, just poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and stood at the window staring out at the Brooklyn skyline. "What happened?" Isabella asked, closing her laptop. "Marco's making moves, trying to turn my own people against me." Dante's voice was flat, emotionless in the way that meant he was feeling too much. 3 of my warehouse supervisors quit today. No explanation, no notice. Just gone. He's trying to isolate you. He's succeeding. Dante drained the whiskey in one swallow. This is what I get for trying to do things differently, for thinking I could build something better than what my father had. In this world, mercy is weakness. Compassion is liability. Isabella stood up, moving closer. "That's not true. Isn't it?" Dante turned to face her, his eyes blazing with pain and fury. "I sent you away 10 years ago to protect you, and the first thing you do when you find me is walk straight back into danger. I try to run legitimate businesses, and my own men betray me for someone more ruthless. I testify against my father to stop his evil, and I end up building the same empire with a prettier facade. Stop it." Isabella's voice cut through his self-loathing like a blade. "You're not your father. You're not even close. How would you know? You haven't seen what I've done, Isabella. The choices I've made, the lines I've crossed. I'm not the boy who helped you with homework anymore." "Good." Isabella closed the distance between them, her hand pressing against his chest where she could feel his heart racing. "Because I'm not looking for that boy. I'm looking at the man you became. The man who's been trying to do better in a world that punishes goodness. The man who's been alone for 10 years because he was too afraid of hurting anyone else. I should be afraid." Dante's hand came up to cover hers, but he didn't push her away. "Everyone I've ever cared about ends up hurt or dead or running for their lives. Then maybe it's time to care about someone who can take care of herself." Isabella looked up at him, seeing the war in his eyes, want versus fear, desire versus duty. "I'm not a child anymore, Dante. I don't need you to protect me from every danger. I need you to trust me enough to face the danger together." Isabella. Her name came out like a prayer, like a warning, like a surrender all at once. "Kiss me." The words were a challenge, a demand, an invitation. "Stop treating me like something fragile and kiss me like you mean it." Dante's control shattered. His hand slid into her hair, tilting her face up as his mouth crashed down on hers. This wasn't the gentle kiss from outside the courthouse. This was 10 years of longing, of denial, of desperate need finally unleashed. Isabella gasped against his mouth, her hands fisting in his shirt as she pulled him closer. She could taste the whiskey on his tongue, feel the barely leashed violence in the way he held her like he was afraid she might disappear if he loosened his grip even slightly. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake." "Probably." Isabella smiled, her fingers tracing the scar through his eyebrow. "Tell me how you got this." The change of subject threw him. "What?" "This scar. It's new since I last saw you." "Tell me the story." Dante pulled back slightly, his hand unconsciously moving to touch the mark. "You don't want to know. I want to know everything. Every scar, every battle, every choice you've made in the last 10 years. Stop trying to protect me from who you are, Dante. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. All of it." Something shifted in his expression, fear giving way to something that looked dangerously like hope. 2 years ago," he said quietly, I broke up a human trafficking ring operating out of one of my construction sites. The men running it didn't appreciate the interference. There was a fight. I won, but not before one of them got close with a knife. Isabella's fingers traced the scar with reverent gentleness. You saved people. I killed 3 men that night, Isabella. Shot them in the head and had their bodies dumped in the East River. That's not heroic. That's just a different kind of monster. No. Isabella's voice was fierce. That's justice in a world where the law moves too slow and protects too few. You think I don't understand that? I've spent 5 years as a forensic accountant, uncovering financial crimes that ruin lives. I've seen what men like those traffickers do, and I've seen how rarely they face real consequences. You work within the system. The system is broken. We both know it. Isabella cupped his face in both hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. I'm not naive, Dante. I know exactly what you are, what you do, and I'm still here. I'm still choosing this. Why? The question was raw, vulnerable. Why would you choose this life? Choose me? Because 10 years ago, you chose me when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Because you're the only person who's ever looked at me and seen not what I couldn't do, but what I could become. Because when I'm with you, I feel brave enough to be who I actually am, instead of who I'm supposed to be. Dante closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. I don't deserve you. Probably not. Isabella smiled, pulling him down for another kiss. Good thing I don't care about what you deserve. I care about what I want. And I want you, Dante Marcelli, every complicated, dangerous, beautiful part of you. This time when they kissed, it was different. Slower, deeper, heavy with promise and possibility. Dante's hands moved to her waist, pulling her flush against him as Isabella's fingers tangled in his hair. Stay, Dante murmured against her lips. Tonight. Don't go back to that rental. Stay here with me. Isabella pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. If I stay, everything changes. You know that, right? There's no going back to professional boundaries and careful distance. I don't want to go back. Dante's thumb traced her jawline with devastating tenderness. I've spent 10 years going back, playing it safe, keeping everyone at arm's length. I'm tired, Isabella. I'm so tired of being alone. Then don't be. Isabella took his hand and placed it over her heart, letting him feel how fast it was racing. I'm right here. I've always been right here. Even when we were 3,000 miles apart. What happened next was inevitable. Years of separation, of longing, of pretending they didn't want each other, all of it burned away in the heat of finally giving in. Dante led her upstairs to the apartment above his office. It was surprisingly sparse, a bedroom with minimal furniture, a bathroom that was purely functional. This wasn't a home. It was just a place where he slept between battles. I don't have much, Dante said, suddenly self-conscious. Most of my money goes to the community programs, to keeping the legitimate businesses running, to... Isabella silenced him with a kiss. I don't care about what you have. I care about who you are. She pulled her shirt over her head, watching his eyes darken as he took in the sight of her. She wasn't the skinny 12-year-old he remembered. She was a woman now, with curves and confidence, and the kind of self-possession that came from knowing exactly what she wanted. Isabella, Dante breathed, his hands hovering just inches from her skin like he was afraid to touch her. Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, I've been sure for 10 years. Isabella took his hands and placed them on her waist, giving him permission, giving him everything. The question is, are you sure? Can you let yourself have this? Have me? Dante's answer came in the form of action rather than words. He pulled her close, his mouth finding hers as his hands explored the curves he'd been trying not to notice for weeks. Every touch was reverent, almost worshipful, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. Isabella gasped as his lips traced down her neck, finding the sensitive spot just below her ear. Her fingers worked at the buttons of his shirt, needing to feel his skin against hers, needing to erase every inch of distance between them. When his shirt finally fell away, she saw the roadmap of violence written across his torso. Scars from knives, from bullets, from a decade of surviving in a world that rewarded brutality. But Isabella didn't flinch. She traced each mark with gentle fingers, learning the story of his survival written in damaged skin. Beautiful, she whispered, and watched his eyes widen in disbelief. These are ugly. Reminders that you survived, that you fought, that you're still here. Isabella pressed a kiss to a particularly nasty scar just below his collarbone. Every mark is proof that you're stronger than everything that's tried to break you. Dante's control finally snapped completely. He lifted her up, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her to the bed. What followed was passionate, desperate, and achingly tender all at once. 10 years of separation being bridged by hands and mouths and whispered promises in the darkness. Afterward, they lay tangled together, both breathing hard, both unable to quite believe what had just happened. "I love you," Dante said into the quiet, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've loved you since you were 12 years old and wrote in that notebook asking me to help with quadratic equations. I've loved you every day since, even when I tried to convince myself I didn't, even when I sent you away. I've never stopped loving you, Isabella, not for a single moment." Isabella turned in his arms, her hand cupping his face. "I love you too. I love the boy who was kind in a house full of cruelty. I love the man who's been trying to build something better in a world that fights him at every turn. I love every version of you that exists, and every version you'll become. I'm going to marry you," Dante said with absolute certainty. "I don't know when, I don't know how we'll make it work, but I'm going to marry you, Isabella Martinez. I'm going to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life." "Is that a proposal?" "It's a promise." Dante kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "A vow. You're mine now, and I'm yours, and nothing, not Marco, not my past, not the entire criminal underworld, is going to take you away from me again." Isabella smiled against his chest, feeling safer than she had in 10 years. "Good, because I have no intention of going anywhere." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two people who'd survived impossible odds to find their way back to exactly where they belonged. But outside Dante's window, the Brooklyn night held dangers they couldn't yet see. Marco Santini was making his moves, and the game was far from over. The next morning, Isabella woke to find Dante already dressed, standing at the window with his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low and dangerous, speaking rapid Italian that she'd gotten better at understanding over the years. When he ended the call, his face was grim. "What happened?" Isabella sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "Marco made his move. 3 of my legitimate businesses were raided by the FBI this morning. Simultaneous raids, perfectly coordinated. They found evidence of money laundering, evidence I know wasn't there yesterday. He's planting evidence. He's forcing my hand. Either I fight back the way my father would have with violence and intimidation, or I let him destroy everything I've built." Dante's jaw clenched. "He's trying to prove that I'm still my father's son. That given enough pressure, I'll revert to type." Isabella got out of bed, wrapping the sheet around herself like a toga as she moved to his side. "Then we prove him wrong. We fight back, but we do it smart, with evidence, with truth, with everything I can dig up on his operations. It's too dangerous now. With the FBI involved, you being connected to me puts you at risk of prosecution as an accomplice. I don't care." "Well, I care." Dante turned to face her, his eyes blazing with protective fury. "I just got you back, Isabella. I'm not losing you because Marco's backing me into a corner. You're not losing me." Isabella's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "But you're also not pushing me away. We're in this together now, remember? Partners, equals. Partners don't let each other walk into federal prosecutions. Partners trust each other to know their own capabilities." Isabella moved closer, her hand on his chest. "I'm a forensic accountant, Dante. This is what I do. I find hidden money. I trace illegal transactions. I build cases that hold up in court. Let me do my job." Dante stared at her for a long moment, clearly torn between wanting to protect her and knowing she was right. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, but we do this carefully. No unnecessary risks. And at the first sign that Marco's targeting you specifically, you disappear. Non-negotiable." "Agreed." Isabella kissed him quickly. "Now I need to see the files from those raided businesses. If Marco planted evidence, he would have had to do it in a way that looks organic. That means there will be inconsistencies, things that don't match the normal patterns." They spent the next 12 hours buried in documents. Isabella's trained eye caught what the FBI investigators had missed: subtle discrepancies in the timestamps, transactions that had been backdated but showed up in the wrong fiscal quarters, money trails that were just a little too convenient. "This is sloppy work," Isabella muttered, highlighting another inconsistency. "Marco must have been in a hurry. These doctored records wouldn't fool an experienced forensic accountant for more than an hour. The FBI agents who did the raids aren't accountants. They're field agents looking for obvious signs of criminal activity. Marco's betting they'll see what they want to see, evidence that I'm running the same operation my father did." Then we need to get a real forensic accountant involved. Someone from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division who can see these inconsistencies. Isabella looked up at him. Do you have any contacts in federal law enforcement? Dante's smile was grim. A few. People who remember that I testified against my father, who want to believe I'm trying to do better. But it's a short list. And calling in those favors means owing people I'd rather not owe. Sometimes the right thing requires owing the wrong people. When did you become so pragmatic? I learned from you. Isabella stood up, stretching muscles that had been cramped from hours of sitting. You taught me that surviving in this world means making impossible choices. This is one of those choices, Dante. Call in the favors. Get someone who can officially review this evidence. Because if we don't, Marco wins by default. Dante pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found the one he needed. Sarah Chen. She's an assistant director in the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. She was part of the team that investigated my father's organization. She always believed I was trying to do things differently. The call was brief but promising. Chen agreed to review the evidence personally, though she made it clear she couldn't make any promises. If the evidence of planted documents was as clear as Isabella claimed, she'd pursue it. But if Isabella was wrong, it would only strengthen the case against Dante. She'll be here tomorrow morning, Dante said, ending the call. Which means we have 24 hours to make sure our evidence is airtight. They worked through the night, Isabella building a comprehensive analysis of every discrepancy, every impossibility, every sign that the evidence had been manufactured. By dawn, she'd created a presentation that even the most skeptical investigator couldn't dismiss. Dante watched her work with something like awe. You're brilliant. I'm thorough. Isabella saved the final document. There's a difference. No, I mean it. The way you see patterns, the way you connect things that seem unrelated, it's remarkable. Dante pulled her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her temple. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm grateful every single day. You gave me a chance at a real life 10 years ago. This is just me returning the favor. When Sarah Chen arrived the next morning, she was exactly what Isabella had hoped for. Sharp, skeptical, and genuinely interested in the truth, rather than closing an easy case. Isabella walked her through the evidence step by step, pointing out every inconsistency, every temporal impossibility, every sign of manipulation. Chen's expression grew more serious with each revelation. This is either the worst money laundering operation I've ever seen, or someone's trying to frame you, Marcelli. That's what we've been trying to tell you, Dante said. The question is who benefits from framing you? Chen looked between Dante and Isabella. Who has access to your businesses? Who knows enough about your operations to plant evidence that looks believable on the surface? Marco Santini, Isabella said without hesitation. Dante's underboss. He's been embezzling for years while simultaneously feeding information to prosecutors to make it look like Dante's responsible. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? Isabella pulled out another folder, the one she'd been building for weeks before the raids. 3 years of financial records showing Marco's embezzlement, paper trails leading to offshore accounts in his name, and communications with known members of the Kozlov crime family, the same organization that's been trying to move into Dante's territory. Chen spent an hour reviewing the documents, her expression growing darker with each page. If this holds up, Santini's looking at 25 to 30 years. It'll hold up, Isabella said confidently. I stake my professional reputation on it. You're willing to testify? In federal court, under oath, knowing that puts a target on your back from both Marco and the Kozlov family. Isabella felt Dante tense beside her, his protective instincts screaming at him to pull her back from this edge. But she spoke before he could. Yes, I'll testify. Isabella, Dante's voice carried a warning. I'll testify, she repeated, looking at him directly. Because this is the right thing to do. Because the truth matters. Because I'm not letting anyone, not Marco, not the Russians, not anyone destroy what you've built. Chen watched this exchange with interest. You two have history. 10 years worth, Isabella confirmed. He saved my life when I was 12. I'm just returning the favor. Brave. Chen started gathering the documents. Stupid, but brave. I'll need to bring this to my superiors. If they agree to pursue it, we'll need your full cooperation, Dante. That means opening every aspect of your operations to federal scrutiny. I've been expecting that, Dante said quietly. I'll cooperate completely. After Chen left, Dante turned to Isabella with fire in his eyes. You shouldn't have agreed to testify. I know. Marco will come after you. The moment he realizes you're the reason his plan failed, He'll target you. And I can't. His voice broke. I can't lose you, Isabella. Not again. Not ever. Isabella cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. You're not going to lose me. We're going to face this together, like we face everything. But I need you to trust me enough to let me make my own choices, even when they scare you. It's not about trust. It's about keeping you alive. Staying silent keeps me safe, but makes me complicit. I won't do that. Not when I have the power to help. She kissed him softly. Besides, you forget who you're dealing with. I survived 3 years in the Marcelli mansion without speaking a word. I can handle Marco Santini. Dante pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like he could shield her from every danger in the world through sheer force of will. I love you so much it terrifies me. Good, Isabella murmured into his chest. Because I love you just as terrifyingly much. The federal investigation moved quickly once Chen had the evidence. Within a week, Marco Santini was arrested on charges of embezzlement, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The evidence Isabella had compiled was irrefutable, and Marco's carefully constructed facade crumbled under the weight of his own crimes. But Marco didn't go quietly. The night after his arrest, 3 men broke into Isabella's Brooklyn rental. She was lucky she wasn't there. She'd been staying at Dante's place more and more, her rental becoming just a place to store clothes she never wore and equipment she rarely used. When Dante got the call from his security team, the same team he'd assigned to watch Isabella's rental despite her protests, his face went white. They left a message, the security chief said over the phone. Spray painted on the wall. It says the accountant pays first. Dante's hand shook as he ended the call. Isabella emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in his robe, her hair still damp from the shower. What's wrong? Marco sent men after you. They broke into your rental. Dante's voice was hollow with barely controlled rage. He's declared war, Isabella. Not on me. On you. Isabella felt ice flood her veins, but she forced herself to stay calm. Then we end this. Fast. I'm putting you on a plane tonight. Back to California. Back to Rosa. Somewhere Marco's people can't reach you. No. This isn't a negotiation. You're right. It's not. Isabella's voice turned to steel. Because I'm not running, and you can't make me. We're ending this, Dante. Together. The way we should have from the beginning. He'll kill you. He'll try. And he'll fail. Because I'm not alone in this. Isabella moved to him, taking both his hands. I have you. I have your security team. I have the entire federal government on my side now. Marco's desperate men make mistakes. And if he doesn't, if he gets lucky, then you make sure he pays for it. Isabella's eyes blazed with fierce determination. But I'm not living my life in fear, Dante. I didn't survive the Marcelli mansion, build a career, find my way back to you, just to run at the first sign of real danger. Dante stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. When did you become so fearless? I've always been this fearless. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy trying to protect me. She smiled, softening the words. I know you want to keep me safe. I know every instinct you have is screaming at you to lock me away somewhere Marco can't reach. But that's not how we survive this. We survive by fighting back, together. What Dante did next surprised her. Instead of arguing, instead of insisting, he pulled her into a crushing embrace and whispered against her hair. Okay. Together. But we do this smart. We don't take unnecessary risks. And we end this before Marco gets another chance. Agreed. Isabella pulled back enough to kiss him. So what's our move? We find out who Marco's working with. The Koslov family didn't just partner with him out of nowhere. Someone connected them. Someone who benefits from me being taken down. A mutual enemy. Exactly. Dante's mind was already racing ahead, calculating angles and possibilities. And I think I know who it is. The answer led them to Vincent Calabrese, Antonio Marcelli's former consigliere, the man who'd been displaced when Dante refused to continue his father's operations the same way. Calabrese had gone quiet after Antonio's imprisonment, but he'd never forgiven Dante for what he saw as betrayal. Isabella spent the next week digging into Calabrese's finances, following money trails that led from him to the Koslovs to Marco. The conspiracy was bigger than they'd imagined, a coordinated effort to destroy everything Dante had built and reclaim the Marcelli empire for someone who would run it the old way. Calabrese wants his power back, Isabella explained, showing Dante the evidence she'd compiled. He's been funding Marco's operations, connecting him with the Russians, planning this takedown for years. We weren't just fighting Marco. We were fighting the ghost of your father's entire organization. The revelation changed everything. This wasn't just about stopping Marco. It was about dismantling the last remnants of Antonio Marcelli's empire once and for all. The trial became a spectacle. Isabella testified for 3 days straight, walking the jury through financial evidence so comprehensive that even Marco's expensive lawyers couldn't shake her testimony. She spoke clearly and confidently, never wavering even when Marco stared at her from the defense table with murder in his eyes. Dante sat in the courtroom gallery every single day, his presence a silent promise: touch her and die. On the final day of testimony, Isabella delivered the killing blow evidence of Vincent Calabrese's involvement, proof that this wasn't just one man's betrayal but a coordinated conspiracy to reclaim the Marcelli empire. When the verdict came down guilty on all charges, Dante and Isabella stood together outside the courthouse, facing a mob of reporters and cameras. But they only had eyes for each other. "It's over," Isabella said, squeezing his hand. "It's over," Dante agreed. Then he dropped to one knee right there on the courthouse steps, pulling out a ring he'd been carrying in his pocket for weeks. "Isabella Martinez, you saved my life when you were 12 years old. You saved it again when you were 22. You've made me believe in possibilities I thought were impossible. You've shown me that goodness can survive in dark places, that love is stronger than violence, that some things are worth fighting for no matter the cost." His voice shook with emotion. "Will you marry me? Will you be my partner, my equal, my home for the rest of our lives?" Isabella's answer came in the form of tears and laughter, and a kiss that sparked 1,000 camera flashes. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." The ring slid onto her finger, a simple band with a single diamond. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed wealth and power. Just a promise, simple and pure, and absolutely genuine. "I love you," Dante said, standing up and pulling her into his arms. "I love you too," Isabella replied. "Now take me home. I'm tired of courtrooms and testimonies and proving things to people who don't matter. I just want to be with you." Home was Dante's Brooklyn apartment, the place that had stopped being just a space where he slept and had become something real, a sanctuary they'd built together out of quiet mornings and late-night conversations, and the slow realization that they were building a life worth protecting. That night, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked about the future, about leaving New York eventually, maybe going back to California to be near Rosa, about the legitimate businesses Dante could fully focus on now that the criminal elements had been purged, about children and homes and all the ordinary dreams that people in their world rarely got to achieve. "Do you ever regret it?" Isabella asked, her fingers tracing idle patterns on his chest. "All of it? The choices you made? The life you gave up?" "Isabella," Dante was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that it took me 10 years to realize that running away from you was the biggest mistake of my life. Everything else? The testimony, the reconstruction, the fights with Marco and Calabrese? That was necessary. That was the price of becoming someone worthy of you. You were always worthy of me." "No," Dante said softly. "I was a scared 18-year-old boy who made one good choice in a lifetime of bad options. But you made me want to be better. You made me fight for that goodness instead of just accepting that I was destined to become my father." Isabella propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him with eyes full of love and certainty. "Then let's make a promise. No more running. No more pushing each other away for protection. From this moment forward, we face everything together. The good, the bad, the terrifying, all of it. Together," Dante agreed, pulling her down for a kiss that sealed the vow. They had no way of knowing that in 4 years, this promise would be tested in ways they couldn't imagine. That marriage and children and the illusion of safety would be shattered when enemies from Dante's past emerged seeking revenge. That their love story was far from over, it was just beginning. But for that night, wrapped in each other and the promises they'd made, they allowed themselves to believe in happy endings. Sometimes, that belief is enough to make them real. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.